So let's talk a little bit about pre-war sports cars, or cars in general for that matter. I took the 38 MG out for a test drive today. One of the things I did was adjust the transmission. So this car, as you might know, uses a pre-selector gearbox. It's called a Wilson design. We'll take a look at it right there. So what this lever does is it adjusts actuating struts. When you select first, the strut will stick out proud of the rest. And when you release the pedal, they call it a gear change pedal instead of a clutch pedal because there's no clutch in this car. When you release that pedal, a bus bar flips up. It's a knife edge bus bar, flips up, and it grabs that strut that's sticking out and it pushes up on it. It gives a clenching action to a band that's around a drum, and that drum has annular gears that correspond to whichever gear ratio you want. So the principle is that those bands slipping take the place of the clutch. So when you grab first gear and you release the pedal, it clenches down on the band associated with the first gear ratio, and it slips around the drum until it engages fully when you let off on the pedal and the car takes off. And the advantage to that design is that the race car drivers didn't have to worry about double clutching during the downshifts, whereas the contemporary gearbox in the 30s and in the 40s may not have had synchro mesh in any of the gears, and the role of synchro mesh is to help synchronize the gear speeds before you engage them so they don't grind. And you can imagine as a race car driver, you've got lots of things to do, and taking one less thing away from your list of things could be very helpful. So that's why they like these pre-selector gearboxes so much. So anyway, I made some adjustments to that. Some of those bands were not at the sweet spot of maximum or optimal grip. So I did a little work to those, adjusted it several times, and you can see the access is right down through here. Like there are no doors on this car. It's extremely uncomfortable. So I laid a moving blanket on this door opening here, and I just reach down, and what you have to do, I've got this down to under an hour. You remove the linkage for the hand throttle control, and then you disassemble all of these screws that hold this selector mechanism on, and you can just set it to the side and still have room for the choke linkage, so you don't have to pull that all apart. And then there's a cover plate underneath. You can see the edge of it right there. You pull that cover plate off and you can get access to those brake bands. And there's little thimble adjuster nuts and self adjusters. And if you mess around with it long enough and read enough literature, eventually you understand how that all works. And so I finally wrapped my head around it and have been able to make fine adjustments on that to the point where I'm really satisfied with how it performs. So that's what I did today. And I was reveling in the adjustment victory, and then suddenly I got on the freeway and I noticed a significant loss of power, and I thought, doesn't feel like carburation because it's still running smoothly. It just has zero power at the low RPM range. And it reminded me of a time when the Supercharger drive shaft that comes off of the crank, see that broken thing down there right at my fingernail? That slipped in the coupler right here in the crank pulley one time. And same symptoms, low on power at the low end, but once you rev it up, it's reasonable power, but still not as much as it should have been. So I limped the car home. I also noticed, this was kind of the key giveaway, on this gauge here, see it says supercharger, vacuum, and pressure. And when you lose your supercharger connection for whatever reason, you're not going to develop the boost. You might get up to zero, as you throttle up, but you're not going to get boost. So that was kind of my cheat. That was my dead giveaway. So I got home and I noticed a little sound too when I parked it. I heard a little tick, 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 tick. It's like, and it sounded like it was coming from this drive shaft. And sure enough, when you look in there, when the engine's running, you can see this rotating. Let's see if I can get my finger in it. You can see this rotating at engine speed because that shaft goes directly off the crank. And you can see there's splines here, and those go into sort of a spring affair in this little container. It's sort of like a flexible coupler. But the thing about that is I don't think it's designed to account for misalignment on the axial plane. So, if if the engine were to flex up at an angle, I think it could accommodate that. But if there's maybe a couple thou of misalignment, you know, in the parallel direction between the supercharger and the motor, I think that shaft starts to bend. And you can imagine if you bend something like that that's metallic enough times, eventually it'll fatigue and break. So I looked online and I looked at McMaster Car, and they sell many different flexible shaft couplers. So that's what I looked at, and I looked at different torque specifications and RPM limitations, and I found one that was good for 10,000 RPM, which will not be the limiting factor in this motor performance, and had other good characteristics that I liked about torque handling. And they're designed for servo motors that start and stop and reverse in production lines, and so that they can take some pretty harsh abuse. So that's what I've specified for this. It's a 3/4 inch shaft, so it's a very common size, also 16 millimeter. They're one and the same according to the catalog for shaft couplers. So that is my solution. This is what I look like, in case you don't know me. And this is my garage, and I enjoy doing this stuff. You know, that kind of thing would have been a major disappointment long ago, but to me, especially after working on this car, it's just another thing that we get to solve. And every time I solve one of these things, it gives me a broader set of tools in my toolbox for troubleshooting. So other than that issue today, the car ran beautifully. The air pressure in the tires is finally dialed in. I think I have it set to like 35 front and low 30 rear. That helps with some of the cornering. With these old style tires, even though they're brand new, they're built to the old style. And so when you corner, there tends to be more sidewall flex, and they want to tuck in, and then the steering sort of snaps from understeer, which is where it's not turning in as far as you'd expect, to oversteer, where it grabs and turns in real hard. And that's really disconcerting in a pre-war sports car. So the solution that I found online is you tend to overinflate this front tire so it's a little bit more rigid, and it will tend to slide a little bit better in the corners rather than just grabbing and tucking. And so I was really pleased with the handling on that. And I also noticed when I filled the fuel tank, which is right back here, that it handles better too. It's almost like having another passenger. It kind of squats down on the springs a little bit better, and it's less jittery and bouncy. So that was kind of neat. And the weather was finally sunny today, which is a really nice thing here in Washington State. We haven't seen sun in quite some time. So I guess that's about it for now. If you like what I'm doing, hit like and subscribe. I've got lots of projects going on here. You probably saw this guy here. And my first thought on the restoration was to strip it down and repaint it all. And I talked to a few people, and they said, you know, it's kind of cool the way it is. So that's got me thinking about a new direction. So if you've got any ideas on that too, leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking. My thought is to leave it just as it is. I'm not going to drive it in the rain anyway, because I seldom drive any of these in the rain, so it's not going to rust. So my thought is to fix some of the little floorboard issues that happen below, and then put new rubber in it, put glass in it, maybe wash and wax it, and just drive it. I think that'd be a lot of fun, and then I don't have to worry about it. All these cars I have to worry about when I drive them, but maybe not this one. Anyway, hit like and subscribe. We can generate discussion in the comments. I'll never make any money on this channel because I'm too boring, but I do appreciate your support. So anyway, thanks again.